Welcome to another session of Informally Formal. Once again, we have a very exciting topic today, and it's called Customer Centricity. So how do we go from customer experience to customer service to customer centricity? And to talk about this very important and interesting subject, we have with us Faizal Chaudhury. He is coming to us from United States of America. He is the Vice President in charge of customer centricity for a $20 billion organization called Sallie Mae that employs about 2,000, is it 2,000? Yeah, about 2,000 people around the United States. So Faizal, just let me give you a little background about Faizal. He got his MBA from a very prestigious school, University of Chicago's Booth School. He serves as director of several companies. He serves also as an adjunct professor of University of Delaware. He's a CPA, also has a management, I always forget this, but he's got loads of credentials and stuff. And most importantly, he heads the customer centricity of this large organization. So no one better to talk about this subject than Faizal Chaudhury. So very warm welcome to you, Faizal. How are you?
Al, I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on your show.
Absolutely. So Faizal, as my introduction alluded, my first question to you would be, tell us, we hear about customer service, customer experience, and now you talk about customer centricity. So help our audience understand, what is the difference?
Sure, Al, and I think, thank you for starting with that question. I think that will really help set the stage. So when we think about customer experience, I think the way to think about it is, a point in time interaction, right? You go to a store, you have an experience buying something, right? That's really the customer service aspect, right? Did the store clerk smile at you? Did he or she, ask you the right question, right? So you think about that customer service, was I served properly during my interaction? So when we think about customer experience, that's a little bit broader, because customer experience is not just a point in time interaction, right? It's the experience you had before maybe going to their website to see, hey, this is what I want before I go to the store, right? You're pre-shopping, so to speak. Then obviously, how was your experience while we were in the store? What's the ambience like? Right? Was it well lit? Where was it neat? Was it clean? And then you have to think about the after experience too, like if you came back and maybe you had some issues with your purchase, how did they go about resolving your complaints, right? Was it a good experience? Was it a bad experience, right? So customer service, very short, customer experience, the broader end-to-end. And then when we talk about customer centricity, it's really the organizational philosophy, right? As an organization, am I committed to making sure that that experience is optimized? So you bring all your company's resources to bear, whether it's financial, human, or technological, so that you are able to create that environment that always caters to the customer's need, right? That's what we say, customer centricity. So it's more of a corporate speak rather than a, individual speak. Obviously, as individuals, you're more focused on the customer service and, customer experience. But for corporations, it's important to be customer centric.
That was brilliant, Faizal. So I guess if I were to look at it and try and understand what you're saying, which right. You have very eloquently explained as it is. So everything ought to begin with knowing and finding out the wants and needs of the customer, right?
Yeah.
So then you set the stage corporate wide as to how do you go on to fulfill that want and need. Would that be correct, right. Faizal?
Absolutely. And look, I'll give you a couple of examples for us to think about, right? That if you don't cater to that wants and need, what could potentially happen, right? And we talk about, for example, companies like Blockbuster, which was the largest retail video store owner in the US. Absolutely. Well, they're gone, right? Why are they gone? Because of Netflix. People didn't want to be tied down to, oh, I got to go, I got to rent, I got to watch it just in this time, and then I got to return it. And if I don't, they're going to charge me a late fee for people who still remember that experience. That evolved to, why don't you just mail me the video or disc so that I can watch it at my time, and then when I'm done with it, I'll return it, and I don't have to worry about late fees. Obviously, with the advent of the fourth industrial revolution and the internet, now there is no disc, right? Even CD is probably an arcane term. Now it's about streaming. And Netflix was able to ride that, right, trend. And now they're more valuable than Disney. Can you just imagine that? Disney with its theme parks, with its movies, with its everything. And Netflix, a streaming company, the market cap of Netflix is almost the same. And there are so many other examples. So think about the taxi industry, right? Uber has done. Again, it was the experience, to go out in, inclement weather and wait for a taxi, not knowing when it would come, not a good experience. What Uber has done, obviously, again, with the help of the fourth industrial revolution, is you have something called a cell phone that's powerful than most of the computers you and I used when we were in school, right? And so you know exactly when your ride's going to be outside. So if it's raining, you just stay inside. You see when it's outside and you go out. So that's the context of why it's so important to always think about what the customer is telling you, right? And make sure that you have an organization and philosophy that pays attention to that.
Right, absolutely. It's not just when you see it when it arrives outside. As a matter of fact, Faisal, you can track it.
You can track it. And even when you're on, like sometimes in the old days, you're like, is the taxi driver ripping me off? Am I going in the right direction? You wouldn't know, right? Yeah. Now, even when you're sitting, you know exactly where you're going. So
right. So several other industries like that, Faisal. Airbnb, of course. Airbnb would not be would be a good example from the standpoint of a learning point. But unfortunately, as you know, Airbnb is in big time trouble with the pandemic situation now. And then, of course, there is other industries that you can talk about, similarly that got wiped out because they were not thinking ahead in terms of how the customer wants and needs were changing. So they couldn't change with the changing times.
Yeah, no, couldn't agree with you more. Again, things change so quickly. I think that's the one thing that we have to be aware, right? So believe it or not, just last week, I believe Airbnb has actually filed their prospectus to go public. So they have, even within the pandemic, initially they were in big trouble, just like you said, just with the hotel industries too. But again, it's how customer-centric you are has really enabled them to come back. And obviously, I would be remiss if I don't mention the most customer-centric, at least in my view, company in the world. It's Amazon, right? Think bookstores. Bookstores are a thing of the past, right? Now think Netflix. Netflix's biggest competition is Amazon because they have streaming service too. So they have literally defined what experience is for everyone and changed every single industry. They're a competitor to Microsoft. They're a competitor to Google. They're a competitor to Disney. How can one company be all these things? It just boggles the mind. And the answer is because they rode their trend early on the whole need to be customer-centric. What do customers want? We're going to invest and double down on those things that customers want, and the payoff will come later. And you can see the payoff now.
Right. Of course, one thing from especially from an American standpoint, as you know, the antitrust policies and stuff like that. I wonder to what extent that applies to Amazon, because as you know, Marvel got broken up, Standard Oil got broken up because they slowly but surely they took on they had such a big concentration of market share that it becomes a monopoly. And as you know, in a free-flowing capitalistic economy, that is a big no-no.
Absolutely. I think you have to be on the lookout for that. But they can get comfort from Microsoft. Remember, Microsoft was left for dead after anti-competitive litigation that forced them to do certain things differently. And lo and behold, they are second only to Apple today in terms of market cap. I think with the advent of their new CEO, again, he was able to pivot the business model quickly and adapt. And now they're a force to be reckoned with without the threat of litigation. So that's a good case study that they can do. But obviously, there are other case studies where that didn't go in their favor. But I think they have good people to think about those things. But you're right. That's one of their biggest risk is probably right now, risk related to anti-competitive litigation more than their competitors themselves.
Right, exactly. Since you mentioned Apple, they just recently became the first $2 trillion company in America. And you talk about Amazon, Jeff Bezos is the first guy to have crossed $200 billion in net worth.
Yeah.
So, in any event, so let's keep going on with our theme of customer centricity. So tell us from those corporate viewers, people that run companies and stuff, when they watch this session, I want them to walk away with some specific skill set, knowledge as to how are you shaping customer centricity in Sallie Mae and how that could apply to the corporate world.
Right. I think what I will do, Al, is just provide a template that most people can use, because obviously each industry, each company is unique, right? And I think, this template is not unique to Sallie Mae. I did a lot of research, with looking at things from PwC, with McKinsey, and other organizations like Forrester and Gartner to see, what are the themes that I see out there that we can then put together in a template. And the template, as I said before, it has to start with organizational buy-in. Right? It can be one person trying to do this. It has to come from the very top and say, what, collectively, we're going to do this. Once you get that buy-in, which is the first hurdle to cross, the other things I would encourage folks to think about would be, you got to think about your employee experience. You can't get good customer experience if you don't provide good employee experience, right? People at Google, some of the happiest people, right? Think about Amazon, think about Apple. Their employees are their biggest advocates, more so than their customers. So you have to think about that. You can't think about your customers without thinking about your employee experience. That's the first thing, right? So you can work to make sure that you think of your employees' experience as a journey rather than a transaction. And then do the same thing with the customer experience portion too. Do you have a good voice of the customer program? That means, do you do surveys to understand what the customer is asking for? Right? Do you solicit feedback? If you think you already know what the customer does and you don't have a voice of the customer program to go out and listen to what your customers are telling you, you probably will not be successful, right? So that's the second part. And third, and most importantly, is data. What data do you have on your employees? What data do you have on your customers? Because as you know, this world is all about data. So you have to be able to get the right data, decipher what the data is telling you, and then use technology so that you can deploy the data in the right ways to enhance your employee experience and enhance your customer experience.
Very well said. So let me just try and understand and recap. So the
Sure.
first thing is a corporate-wide top-down buy-in. Everyone needs to be on the same platform, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you're talking about, of course, when you have a company-wide buy-in, you have to, in particular, think about your employees. A happy employee makes a customer happy.
Yeah.
Right? And then lastly, I guess the third point you're saying is big data, right?
Yeah.
Which is really a pillar of the fourth industrial revolution.
Yes.
Big data is coming at us at a pace that we have not seen before. And not just in multiples of 1, 2, 4, 5. No, we're talking about hundredfolds.
Yeah. Look, Al, we would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit more about data. And I'll give you a real life example. You Google it, you'll find out, right? This is how powerful data can be. And this is a true story, right? So Target does pretty good with data, right? Target is a very large retail organization here in the US. So they're known for utilizing their data. And so this one customer went to a local Target store and demanded to talk to the manager. And when they were talking to the manager, he's like, this is the flyer I got from your store. It's littered with all kinds of things for babies and pregnancy. And what are you trying to do? I have a teenager in my house. Are you trying to get her pregnant? And the store manager, apologized profusely. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry, sir. Of course, that was not my intent. I'll look into it and please accept our apologies if the wrong, promotional flyers went to your house. Now we're going to stop here before we come back to the story. But this is what Amazon does so well, probably even better than Target. What they've figured out is if you're a customer, you buy certain things, they can match the data to make predictions about you. So if you buy like prenatal vitamins and maybe something else, they know with a high degree of certainty, maybe you're pregnant. You see where the story is going, right? Mm-hmm. Target knew before the father of that teenage daughter that someone in that household was pregnant based on the data and the shopping history of that girl at Target.
Wow.
Okay, so to make the story come to a conclusion, Months down the line, when the father was back in the store, he met the store owner and the store manager. And the store manager didn't know all this because he is one store. The flyers all go out from the corporate headquarters, which is in a different place. They're sorting all this data by your zip code. They're sending you all kinds of things. So the store manager doesn't even know. But he came back and said, you know what? Turns out you knew something about my household that even I didn't. Right? The fact that his daughter was pregnant. So when we talk about data, that's what I'm talking about. What do you know about your customer? Are you able to link all those data points to make those predictive analytics come true? So it's not just about data. You will need some very, very smart people who know data analytics, right? Who can do these models that can be predictive and tell you here's what they want. Like if you have used Amazon, you buy something. At the bottom, they'll give you a list of, hey, are you also interested in this, 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 this? How do you think they know that? It's big data combined with algorithms.
Right, exactly. So Faisal, let me ask you now. So to start this shift to customer centricity,
right,
which is basically if we look at the future, we're not just talking about this is something we would like to have. This is something for survival. Either you do it or you're out, whether be it in a year's time or 5 years or what have you. So it's an absolute must that we think in those terms. So now, how do you go about changing the mindset of people at the top? If they don't change, we have seen companies disappear because they were not quick enough to change.
Yeah.
So how do you go about any suggestions, thoughts on that?
Yeah, and this is the hardest part, and that's why I mentioned at the very beginning that it has to be top down. If they don't buy it, your chances of success is zero. So what I can tell you is the research is out there, right? Proven research, whether you look at PwC, McKinsey, Forrester, Gartner, they all have research that show that if you embark on that journey, the investment that you make on your employees will pay itself. The investment that you make for CX project will make itself. Because again, for the CEOs, they're worried about their bottom line. Like, let's be honest. So there are, research out there that definitively connects investment to that with a very high ROI. And then you can do your own business cases, right? The cost benefit analysis. Now that will obviously vary by, corporations, but even in our organizations, we did cost benefit analysis for the investment that we wanted to make. And they all had a business value to it. We weren't going to embark on something that's just, well, it sounds good and it seems nice and let's do it, right? It was backed up by hard data and a business case that showed you invest the money, you're going to get a reward at the end.
Right. Faisal, your CEO, Jonathan Witter, he comes from a customer service, customer centricity background because he was the executive vice president of Hilton's Worldwide, right?
He was chief people officer. I believe he was the chief customer officer there, correct?
Yeah, chief customer officer. So now, so I'm sure that it makes your life a lot easier because he comes from that background. Even though he's a financial guy, I think he's worked for a lot of top financial companies as well as Morgan Stanley and what have you. But the fact that he brings that background makes your life a lot easier, wouldn't you say?
Sure. I think so. And I think, John is an incredible guy, very smart. And I think he, like most other leaders, realizes what you and I were just talking about, that it's all about the customer. If you're not able to, cater to what the customer is asking for, then your chances of success diminishes, right? I mean, I think that's a bottom line that everyone can agree with. I think one of the things I read in one of Forrester's research is you have to be, customer-led and insight-driven, right? So remember, we talked about the voice of the customer program. You have to have a very, bilateral and multilateral communication open with all your customers so that you're in tune with what they want to lead you to. And then insight-driven, right? Based on that, make sure that you collect that insight that allows you to drive the changes that you need so that you're able to then meet the needs of your customer.
So very quickly, Faisal, what would you say? What would you say in terms of, let's say, bullet points? What are some of those compelling arguments that you would place in front of a CEO that is not necessarily customer centric?
Right. Look, I think the bottom line is, happier customers translate to higher profit. You can find a host of research that will probably do a much more eloquent job of saying that exact same story that I'm just telling you. right? So that can be the starting point to pique their interest. And then you can back that up with these studies that I'm talking about to say, hey, are you seeing what kind of ROI these companies are getting based on their investment in customer experience? Why are we not doing the same thing? And really pose it to them so that they come back to you and say, you know what, the more I read about it, the more I agree. Why are we not doing it? Right? And then you can follow the template with regards to making sure that you're focusing on your employee experience, you're focusing on your customer experience, you're focusing on making sure you have the right technology infrastructure to allow you to do that. Allow you to do that, meaning you take the data and then deploy the data in the ways that is going to be meaningful and profitable for your organization.
Yeah, what would you say? In my time in the United States, I remember we were so focused on the 10Qs and the 10Ks.
Sure.
And the quarterly results and facing the press, facing the investors and what have you. So top management is also under a tremendous amount of pressure from Wall Street for performing this quarter. Now, customer centricity is a long-term thing. It is something, of course, it will bring in a good return on investment, will have a good ROI, but for that you have to have the mindset that this is for the long haul.
Yeah, so I do agree with you, and that's where business cases become so important. It's all based on individual use cases, right? How are you gonna deploy the very valuable capital that you have so that you're able to get the optimal return? So this is not gonna be like, hey, just because I'm saying it, you should do it. There's a lot of work behind the scene too, and I go back to the fact that you do it by business cases. You create a cost-benefit analysis that shows that this is what you get. And if it ranks high enough versus its competitors for that capital, what other places, you absolutely, in a capitalistic world, you're going to deploy capital where the return is going to be most, right? What I am telling you is you'd be surprised, once you see the return that you can get on investment related to customer experience, they more than carry their weight, right? So that's why it's not, based on gospel that, hey, I'm going to do it. It's based on data-driven business cases.
Yeah, exactly. Faizal, now specifically, can you tell our audience some of the initiatives that you have that you have taken at Sallie Mae?
Right. So a large one, as we talked about, is data modernization for the various reasons that we have just talked about. We have to have a very flexible platform where all the data is housed so that our data scientists are able to get the holistic picture of the customer. That, it's extremely important. So we're making great strides on that. And then we have made a lot of technology investment in customer-centric technology. For example, you may have heard of companies like Adobe and Salesforce, right? Sure. To be customer-centric, a proper customer relationship management software is key that is able to tie all these things together, right? Salesforce and Microsoft are the two big players in that space, Salesforce by far being the largest, and we have invested in a new platform with Salesforce to allow us to be more customer-centric, right? Same thing on the data and marketing side. We have invested in technology from Adobe that will allow us to deploy the right content at the right time to the right customer, right? Again, talking about personalization that we talked about, right? Giving the customer what they want. You need to have the right data that tells you what that is, and then the technology platform for you to deploy all that, right? So that can be a different discussion on what are the technologies behind all this. But these are billion-dollar business. I think just last week, and I'm dating myself here, but Salesforce, already $100+ billion company, jumped 25% in market cap in one day based on their earnings beat. We were talking about that. So can you imagine? And they consider themselves, we're all about helping you solve your customers' problems, right? Same thing on Adobe. Like if, we have talked about the Googles of the world and the Microsoft of the world. Take a look at Adobe, take a look at Salesforce and see the trajectory. They're playing that customer trend, the customer centricity trend.
Wow. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Faizal, so what would be some of your closing remarks then, if you were to wrap it up in terms of the new way of thinking, which is from top down, customer centric?
I think, as I said before, we are in the midst of an experience economy. If you're not thinking of your company in terms of an experience economy, you're going to miss out, and maybe even worse. So I'll go back to that same comment that I echoed before. It's not just the fourth industrial revolution in terms of the internet, but it's really the expectation has changed. It's an experience economy is what we are living in. So if you're not able to adapt to delivering the right experience, good luck.
All right. I guess you couldn't have wrapped it up in any better fashion than that. Faizal, it was indeed such a pleasure to have you. And maybe we will bring you back to talk about some of the technological innovations. Maybe you can bring along someone else who can, along with you, who can talk about some of the technological things that we could learn from. And how do you deliver a 360-degree customer experience, right?
Would be my pleasure. I look forward to it.
Yep. Faizal, once again, thank you so very much for your valuable time. And to our audience, thank you for joining us, with an invitation for you to join us again next week. I sign off right here. Bye-bye.